There are so many different sayings that people hold on to in regards to the scriptures. The religion of Christianity has many different mindsets and understandings that people widely accept, but they actually don't really understand what it is that they're saying. This is what we call a Bible. It contains both what people label as the Old and New Testament. What a majority of people do is read the New Testament and then a few chapters, verses, or books from the Old Testament, and from that, they feel that they have a good understanding of their faith. They start at the end of the book, build their foundation from this, and then apply that foundation to fit the Old Testament whenever they decide to try to read it. When many people get to books like Leviticus and Deuteronomy, they simply say, "This no longer applies to me, so I don't need to read this." And from all of that, there is a strong disconnect between what people believe and what the Bible actually says. And the diagnosis is from two main reasons. One, people aren't reading the Bible for themselves. And two, people have been led by false teachers who have given them a false understanding of what the Bible says. For me personally, a long time ago, as I started evaluating what I know and believe to be a part of my faith, I had to go back and ask myself serious questions. And if the answer was not yes, I told myself I had to go back and relearn it. So I'm going to ask you that same question, and on your own, please ask yourself this as you go over what you believe and why. The question is, ask yourself, if I didn't hear this at church, or this wasn't something that the majority of people who call themselves Christians believe, would I get this understanding from reading the Bible on my own? That's simple. This was the same thinking I used when I started evaluating the rapture doctrine. If you watch the End Times Prophecy series, you understand why that doctrine should be discarded. So many of us fight for these things that we believe in and different doctrines that we have been taught. But the scary thing is that much of these ideas and doctrines and philosophies and traditions of men, they do not come from the word, but from man. In Colossians chapter 2, verse 8, the Apostle Paul warns us, "Beware, lest anyone cheat you through philosophy and empty deceit, according to the tradition of men, according to the basic principles of the world, and not according to Messiah." But the thing is that we have not taken that warning seriously, and the majority have been led astray by tares who use doctrines and philosophies of men as a basis for our faith. In these last days, we need to cancel all that out and strictly depend on the word. There are things that we can debate on. There are many secular topics that we may disagree on, but our faith is not something that should come with this. But because we know Yahusha prophesied of the wheat and the tares, we know that there will be a counterfeit people who will look like they hold our faith, but in the end, they were actually weeds. What we believe and how we come into our faith in Messiah is truly important because we do not want to be led by tares. So it is important that we put away all the doctrines of men, all the philosophies of men, and just give the word the final say. And so as we prepare for our Father's kingdom, we need to clean house and prepare ourselves as an unspotted bride for the bridegroom. One of the most scary verses in the Bible is one that I use regularly. It is found in Matthew chapter 7, verses 21 through 23. "Not everyone who says to me, Adonai, Adonai, shall enter the kingdom of heaven, but he who does the will of my Father in heaven. Many will say to me in that day, Adonai, Adonai, have we not prophesied in your name, cast out demons in your name, and done many wonders in your name? And then I will declare to them, I never knew you. Depart from me, you who practice lawlessness." It's so scary to really hear that we could be doing many things in his name and calling on him, but he will tell us to depart from him because he never knew us. But I want you to think about it. What was the accusation that he gave when he said that he would tell us to depart? He said, "You who practice lawlessness." You see, to be lawless is to be in a state of disorder due to disregarding the law. But wait, that doesn't make sense, because in Christianity, we are told and made to believe that we are not under the law. Why would he tell me to depart from him if he nailed the law on the cross? That makes no sense. Is the Bible contradicting itself? No, it's not. The Bible is not contradicting itself. but it's possible that how we might have learned the Bible is contradicting what Yahusha himself has said. Again, go back to it. If you didn't hear this at church, or this wasn't something that the majority of people who call themselves Christian believe, would you get this understanding from reading the Bible on your own? Not just picking out a few scriptures and isolating them, but reading it and studying it. Because yes, if you just started reading the New Testament by itself without ever reading the Old Testament, then I'm sure you could come to a conclusion of lawlessness. But this is only because you do not have proper context. The Bible is a complete book that must be used in completeness. We read it and understand it precept upon precept. You cannot start at the back of the book and then assume you understand what was truly happening and how we got to these understandings. I have been led to handle some difficult topics over the past few months, and it is at this time that we're going to handle a huge one. We need to understand our relationship with the law and statutes of Yahuwah given to the children of Yasharel. My sincere desire is that no one following this ministry should ever hear, "Depart from me, you who practice lawlessness. I never knew you." We need to understand this topic about the law. And if you don't mind bearing with me, I'd like to make sure that we are all ready for our King Yahusha. Let's begin. Okay, so let's just deal with this first. Let's get this out the way. For many people, if you have only heard this topic spoken of from the Christian pulpits, then some of this may challenge your original understanding or your thought. Please don't come at me first before you pray about what is being said, and please don't start speaking before you watch the video in its entirety. I understand the cognitive dissonance that wants to activate right now, so I'm going to try to deal with this topic with care, as I do most topics. The first things that people want to throw at you is that the New Testament clearly says we are not under the law, but grace. We can grab many different scriptures from Paul, and it clearly says that we are not under the law. For as many as are of the works of the law are under the curse. For it is written, "Cursed is everyone who does not continue in all things which are written in the book of the law, to do them." Galatians chapter 3, verse 10. For sin shall not have dominion over you, for you are not under the law, but under grace. Romans chapter 6, verse 14. For Messiah is the end of the law for righteousness to everyone who believes. Romans chapter 10, verse 4. And yes, there are a few more like this. So yes, I know the immediate thought is to just reject what I am bringing up here. I get it. But if you go back to my original point about reading the Bible in its entirety, understanding it from the Old Testament and then moving into the New Testament, these scriptures don't come at you the same way. Again, we read it precept upon precept, especially when we know that the Apostle Paul himself kept the law. He said, "Do we then make void the law through faith? Certainly not. On the contrary, we establish the law." Romans chapter 3, verse 31. You see, Paul himself was a Pharisee, a strict adherer to the Torah. As a matter of fact, all of the disciples were. I mean, they were not Pharisees, of course, but they all observed the Torah and lived under the ways of Yah. There are no examples found in the scriptures that show righteous men that ignore the Torah and live lawlessly after the law was given. Not one example. I mean, Yahusha, our king, he followed the law. The disciples followed the law. As you read the New Testament, the one understanding that you should have is that everyone that's writing this New Testament kept the law. It was their way of life. It was their culture. So now, in these modern times, many of us live as if the law is done away with and we do not need to mind it. We are living a completely different way than any of our examples in the Bible. It's like, here's the Bible. These men all are our examples and show us the way to please Yah and to be ready for him. But then what we do today is practice a faith that doesn't resemble one single person that was found righteous in the scriptures. That makes no sense. So we need to understand this because, like I said, Messiah himself kept the law. Messiah said himself he did not abolish the law. Those are words out of his own mouth. What did he say exactly? Do not think that I came to destroy the law or the prophets. I did not come to destroy, but to fulfill. For surely I say to you, till heaven and earth pass away, One jot or one tittle will by no means pass from the law till all is fulfilled. Whoever therefore breaks one of the least of these commandments and teaches men so shall be called least in the kingdom of heaven. But whoever does and teaches them, he shall be called great in the kingdom of heaven. For I say to you that unless your righteousness exceeds the righteousness of the scribes and Pharisees, you will by no means enter the kingdom of heaven. That's Matthew chapter 5, verses 17 through 20. So let's take that. Heaven and earth have not passed away, right? So not one jot or tittle has passed away from the law. He said, therefore, one who breaks the least of these commandments and teaches men so shall be called least in the kingdom. And then he also said that unless our righteousness exceeds the righteousness of the scribes and the Pharisees, we won't enter the kingdom of heaven. And you should understand that because the scribes and the Pharisees kept the law. They had a heart issue though. They just were justifying themselves before men, but they still kept the law. So if your righteousness doesn't exceed their way, then you got a problem on your hand. You really need to understand this. There is a big misunderstanding here if everyone believes that we are all able to live how we want to. In the last days, found in the book of Revelation, do you know who it is that Satan makes war with? Revelation chapter 12 verse 17 says, "And the dragon was enraged with the woman, and he went to make war with the rest of her offspring, who keep the commandments of Elohim and have the testimony of Yahusha the Messiah." Satan is against those who keep the commandments of Yah and have the testimony of Yahusha. Listen, it's not just those who have faith in Yahusha, but those who keep Yah's commandments as well. There's two parts to it: keeping the commandments and having the testimony of faith in Yahusha. It says it very clearly there. But listen, let me make this clear because I know for some people you might be triggered right now because you've always heard that you're not under the law, so this is just new to you. So let me make this clear. It is not keeping the commandments that justifies us to Yahuwah. Understand this clearly. We are not justified, nor do we receive salvation by keeping the law. So please hold those points about this until you understand. We are not justified by the law, but we're justified by faith. But understand, how can you show your faith if it's not through your works? Faith without works is dead. How can you show that you love him if you live in complete opposition to his ways? It's like saying, yes, I love Jesus, but I just have a problem with cheating on my wife every day. But you can't tell me that I don't love Jesus and that I'm not saved. Or people like, yes, I am saved by grace and my belief in Jesus, but I just got this problem with being a murderer. I kill people, but they deserve it, so it doesn't really matter. I believe in Jesus and I'm not under the law. Do you see the hypocrisy with that? Yahusha said, if you love me, keep my commandments. That's John chapter 14, verse 15. He said, he who has my commandments and keeps them, it is he who loves me. And he who loves me will be loved by my Father, and I will love him and manifest myself to him. John chapter 14, verse 21. So we need to understand this because it is crucial. But before we go any deeper, let's try to look at it from another angle. Let me ask you, do you know what Satanism is? Well, you're wrong if you feel that it is the worship of Satan. I mean, in the mainstream, that's not what they say. It's not worshiping Satan or the devil. That's not the main faith in Satanism as they claim. Satanism is lawlessness. Do as thou wilt is the whole law. It basically says, do what you want. That's the doctrine that they follow. And so then, if that's the doctrine of Satanism, what's the opposite? What is Yah's way? It's living according to the law of Yahuwah. He has ways and statutes that he has commanded his children to obey and follow. When we live contrary to them, we live in lawlessness, which is in fact Satanism. A majority of the world live as Satanists, especially here in the United States. But people do not recognize it because it is not a doctrine or faith that is clarified in the minds. It's not taught clearly that, hey, everybody that lives this way is a Satanist. Satan just promoted lawlessness and pushed people away from following Yahuwah. And yes, there is liberty through Messiah. But here's the problem. Those who preach liberty today in Messiah, they never grew up with an understanding of obedience to Yah's ways that allowed them to clearly understand how this liberty actually works. And all of this needs to be discussed. So before we go deeper into the law of Moses, we need to handle the commandments that Yahuwah marked into stone. Because people love asking, well, do you keep all 613 commandments in the Torah? And they say this in a way as trying to speak against this topic. But the fact is that people can't even keep the 10 that Yahuwah commanded Yasharel with. So let's discuss that, because this is highly important. This is what Yahusha is speaking about when he's speaking keeping his commandments. We'll go to Exodus chapter 19 and 20. Let's read. In the 3rd month, after the children of Yasharel had gone out of the land of Egypt, on the same day they came to the wilderness of Sinai, for they had departed from Rephidim, had come to the wilderness of Sinai, and camped in the wilderness. So Yasharel camped there before the mountain, and Moses went up to Elohim, and Yahuwah called to him from the mountain, saying, Thus you shall say to the house of Jacob, and tell the children of Yasharel, You have seen what I did to the Egyptians, and how I bore you on eagle's wings, and brought you to myself. Now therefore, if you will indeed obey my voice, and keep my covenant, then you shall be a special treasure to me above all people. For all the earth is mine, and you shall be to me a kingdom of priests and a holy nation. These are the words which you shall speak to the children of Yasharel. So Moses came and called for the elders of the people, and laid before them all these words which Yahuwah commanded him. Then all the people answered together and said, All that Yahuwah has spoken, we will do. So Moses brought back the words of the people to Yahuwah. And Yahuwah said to Moses, Behold, I come to you in the thick cloud, that the people may hear when I speak with you, and believe you forever. So Moses told the words of the people to Yahuwah. Then Yahuwah said to Moses, Go to the people and consecrate them today and tomorrow, and let them wash their clothes, and let them be ready for the 3rd day. For on the 3rd day Yahuwah will come down upon Mount Sinai in the sight of all the people. You shall set bounds for the people all around, saying, Take heed to yourselves that you do not go up to the mountain or touch its base. Whoever touches the mountain shall surely be put to death. Not a hand shall touch him, but he shall surely be stoned or shot with an arrow. Whether man or beast, he shall not live. When the trumpet sounds long, they shall come near the mountain. So Moses went down from the mountain to the people and sanctified the people, and they washed their clothes. And he said to the people, Be ready for the 3rd day. Do not come near your wives. Then it came to pass on the 3rd day, in the morning, that there were thunderings and lightnings and a thick cloud on the mountain. And the sound of the trumpet was very loud, so that all the people who were in the camp trembled. And Moses brought the people out of the camp to meet with Elohim, and they stood at the foot of the mountain. Now Mount Sinai was completely in smoke, because Yahuwah descended upon it in fire. Its smoke ascended like the smoke of a furnace, and the whole mountain quaked greatly. And when the blast of the trumpet sounded long and became louder and louder, Moses spoke, and Elohim answered him by a voice. Then Yahuwah came down upon Mount Sinai on the top of the mountain. And Yahuwah called Moses to the top of the mountain, and Moses went up. And Yahuwah said to Moses, Go down and warn the people, lest they break through to gaze at Yahuwah, and many of them perish. Also, let the priests who come near Yahuwah consecrate themselves, lest Yahuwah break out against them. But Moses said to Yahuwah, The people cannot come up to Mount Sinai, for you warned us, saying, Set bounds around the mountain and consecrate it. Then Yahuwah said to him, Away, get down, and then come up, you and Aaron with you. But do not let the priest and the people break through to come up to Yahuwah, lest he break out against them. So Moses went down to the people and spoke to them. That's Exodus chapter 19. And Elohim spoke all these words, saying, I am Yahuwah, your Elohim, who brought you out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of bondage. You shall have no other gods before me. You shall not make yourself a carved image, any likeness of anything that is in heaven above, or that is in the earth beneath, or that is in the water under the earth. You shall not bow down to them, nor serve them. For I, Yahuwah, your Elohim, am a jealous El, visiting the iniquity of the fathers upon the children to the 3rd and 4th generations of those who hate me, but showing mercy to thousands, to those who love me and keep my commandments. You shall not take the name of Yahuwah your Elohim in vain, for Yahuwah will not hold him guiltless who takes his name in vain. Remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy. 6 days you shall labor and do all your work, but the seventh day is the Sabbath of Yahuwah your Elohim. In it you shall do no work, you, nor your son, nor your daughter, nor your male servant, nor your female servant, nor your cattle, nor your stranger who is within your gates. For in 6 days Yahuwah made the heavens and the earth, the sea, and all that is in them, and rested the seventh day. Therefore Yahuwah blessed the Sabbath day and hallowed it. Honor your father and your mother, that your days may be long upon the land which Yahuwah your Elohim is giving you. You shall not murder. You shall not commit adultery. You shall not steal. You shall not bear false witness against your neighbor. You shall not covet your neighbor's house. You shall not covet your neighbor's wife, nor his male servant, nor his female servant, nor his ox, nor his donkey, nor anything that is your neighbor's. That's Exodus chapter 20. And this is what we know as the Ten Commandments. So let's cover them. The first one, number 1. You shall have no other gods before me. Exodus chapter 20, verse 3. This is a huge commandment in which most people break today. This was a sin that caused Yasharel to be driven into captivity because they served other gods. You should know that Yah does not play around with this commandment. And you should know that this is a commandment that Satan attacks aggressively. Why? Because he is introducing himself as the God of this world. But what he does is deceptive, because the first way that people break this commandment is not by going to Satan really, but is placing themselves as a god. They worship themselves, they put themselves before everything, making themselves as a god, which then makes them commit idolatry. This really is a topic by itself. But understand, most people break this commandment, the first commandment, because they put themselves over Yahuwah. They place their needs, their desires, their wants, their goals. They put everything in priority over him. And then later on, they just bring him in when they feel comfortable with it. And therefore, they make these other things God over their life, which is exactly a doctrine of Satanism. This first commandment is broken many times by many people, so you need to understand that. But for those that think that you're not under the law, do you think it is okay to put other gods before Yahuwah? If you know the answer is no, then rethink your position on not following the law, because the apostles of the New Testament abided in this law too. The next one, number 2. You shall not make for yourself a carved image, any likeness of anything that is in heaven above, or that is in the earth beneath, or that is in the water under the earth. You shall not bow down to them, nor serve them. Exodus chapter 20, verses 4 and 5. You know how many people accept this practice? Like personally, like my grandmother has all these carved images in her home. It's just a thing that their generation accepted, I guess, because it's considered African art, even though they don't really know and understand what these carved images are representations of. They just think it's African. This is a common practice. The Roman Catholic Church itself is probably the biggest breaker of this commandment, with all their carved statues that they worship and bow down to and teach others to do the same. In the Protestant Church, with all that Christmas worship people do every year you see them breaking this commandment, having us bowing to all those Jesus and Mary statues and the mangers and all that other stuff. Back in the day, I don't know if they still do this now, but they used to have us wearing Jesus pieces around our neck, literally with the head of the Messiah around our necks. You see this practice continuously today, and it just goes on without thought or care. It's not even thought of. This was another practice that Yasharel was chastised severely for. So for those that think that you are not under the law, do you think it is okay to make carved images and bow down to them or serve them? If you know the answer is no, then rethink your position on not following the law, because the apostles of the New Testament abided in this law too. Next, number 3. You shall not take the name of Yahuwah your Elohim in vain, for Yahuwah will not hold him guiltless who takes his name in vain. It's Exodus chapter 20, verse 7. I've spoken about this in many videos. To take his name in vain is to make it meaningless, bringing it to nothing. What could be more meaningless than to not even say it or acknowledge it? To bring his name down to merely a title. But yet, this is what the majority does. We take his name in vain. And he said he will not hold him guiltless who takes his name in vain. A majority of the world who calls themselves Christians break this command, many out of ignorance. But there are others, even after presented with the truth, they fight over it. They don't think that they need to do this. For those that think that you are not under the law, do you think it's okay to take Yahuwah's name in vain? If you know the answer is no, then rethink your position on not following the law, because the apostles of the New Testament abided in this law too. Number 4, remember the Sabbath day, to keep it holy. 6 days you shall labor and do all your work, but the 7th day is the Sabbath of Yahuwah your Elohim. In it you shall do no work. Exodus chapter 20, verses 8 and 9. This is a huge commandment that is spoken of many times throughout the Old Testament. If you read the Old Testament, you see just how important this command has always been to Yah. But this is another commandment that is broken by Christians as a majority. First off, most don't recognize that they worship the Sabbath on the 1st day and not the 7th day, because Rome changed the time of observance a long time ago. This is why people go to church on Sundays and they don't work on this day. They are unknowingly keeping the Sabbath on the 1st day. So yeah, there's many that do not understand that they follow the Sabbath on the 1st day, and their reasoning for not honoring the Sabbath is different. Growing up under the Christian church, what was taught to me is that the reason I should not honor the Sabbath is because we don't need to anymore, because we rest in Jesus. But what does that even mean? I rest in Yahusha, absolutely. I rest in him because I trust him. I believe in him. He's my shield and my counselor. Of course I rest in him, and he is master. But the practice of resting on the 7th day is quite different than just resting in him. The commandment is that we work for 6 days and rest on the 7th. A day of rest as he commands is not a burden, it's a blessing. Just as Yahuwah rested on the 7th day after he made creation, we rest on the 7th day as we rest from all of our labor. Yahusha himself followed this, so we follow him. And as you read the scriptures, particularly in the Old Testament, you will see that this was something that is near and dear to Yasharel. It's spoken many times in the scriptures, so you can see how important it is to Yah. But again, this is a commandment that most people feel is not even necessary to consider any longer. But this was to be as a sign of the people that were under a covenant with Yahuwah. Why would we, who believe in him, do anything differently today? So for those that think you are not under the law, do you think it is okay to forget the Sabbath day? Well, in this one thing, I know many of you do, but you should reconsider it. If you know the answer is no, then rethink your position on not following the law, because the apostles of the New Testament abided in this law too. Next, number 5, honor your father and your mother, that your days may be long upon the land which Yahuwah your Elohim is giving you. Exodus chapter 20, verse 12. This is an important commandment, and if it was held correctly, the world would be a better place, because we will follow and honor our parents, who coincidentally would honor their parents, and by doing this, if they were all in line with Yah and his ways, the obedience and following of Yah would go down and trickle down through our society and our culture. But because people break this commandment today and every day, anything goes for this generation. And the generations keep getting worse and worse. Now listen, Yahusha does provide more clarity on this, because we are not to follow our parents into rebellion and sin, obviously. We cannot honor them more than we honor him, and we cannot follow them into rebellion and idolatry. This is something I struggled with for a long period of time, because I always wanted to stay in line with my parents. But they did not desire Yah in the same way, and so I had to make a decision to follow after Yahusha more than I followed their ways, because I was not going to be led into sin and rebellion because of them. But for those of us who have parents who follow Yah and are led by him and are in a covenant with him, honoring our parents should be an easy command to follow. How can you say you love Yah as your father and you can't even honor your own parents? For those that think you are not under the law, do you think it is okay to dishonor your father and your mother? But if you know the answer is no, then rethink your position on not following the law, because the apostles of the New Testament abided in this law too. Next, number 6, you shall not murder. Exodus chapter 20, verse 13. This should be a simple one. Do not go around killing people. People often confuse this with what the Israelites had to do as they were commanded to go into their promised land. This was a commandment amongst them as a people. If they were living amongst each other in peace, if they were able to kill someone because of offense, then problems would never get handled. This still holds true to this day. We cannot go around killing people because they wronged us. This should be an easy commandment to keep and understand why. Now, according to the Torah, Yasharel did have their own way of dealing with people that broke the Torah and were rebellious, and that is a different discussion altogether. They had order. It's likened to why, if you have an infection in your leg or your hand and it's spreading, what do people do? They cut off the leg or the hand or whatever, so that the infection does not spread. The children of Yasharel had laws, and this was fully understood and explained. In the times that we're in, none of that is justified because we are not a people living under Yah's covenant, so we do not kill. Those who wrong us we pray for and try to minister to them, but we know that in the end, vengeance is Yah's, and He will avenge us. So we do not commit murder. But for those that think that you are not under the law, do you think it is okay to murder? If you know the answer is no, then rethink your position on not following the law, because the apostles of the New Testament abided in this law too. Number 7, you shall not commit adultery. Exodus chapter 20, verse 14. Another one that is self-explanatory. When we marry, we are taking vows before Yahuwah and joining our partner and becoming one flesh. Just as we are not to break our vow before Yah and worship other gods, we should not break our vow with our spouse and commit adultery. An adulterous person was looked upon very badly in the culture of Yasharel. Today, in this lawless generation, adultery and divorce is just common. People make vows before Yah, but unfortunately they do not hold those vows in high regard. But if you can make promises and vows to Yah and not keep them, it does not only say something about your relationship with your spouse, but your relationship with our Creator. We cannot commit adultery. It's just that simple. For those that think you are not under the law, do you think it is okay to commit adultery? If you know the answer is no, then rethink your position on not following the law, because the apostles of the New Testament abided in this law too. Next, number 8, you shall not steal. Exodus chapter 20, verse 15. Lawlessness. These last few commands are just pure examples of how we are to conduct ourselves. Today, it is clear that we should not murder, we should not steal. But you must understand that during those days, they had no rules or laws. They did as they felt they should. When Yahuwah took Yasharel to himself, he gave them order. We should not take things that do not belong to us. I don't think I need to dwell on this because this is one thing that most people understand. The only question is, do you understand this because you follow the rules of Yah or because you're following the rules of this land? For most that are just following the laws of the land, when things get rough, because it's not Yahuwah that's guiding this thought, but the law of the land, you can be led in rebellion. So do this because Yahuwah says not to do this, not just because the law of the land says this. Now, for those that think you are not under the law, do you think it is okay to steal? If you know the answer is no, then rethink your position on not following the law, because the apostles of the New Testament abided in this law too. Number 9, you shall not bear false witness against your neighbor. Exodus chapter 20, verse 16. This is another commandment that people break without question. People will tell a lie about someone else for many different reasons, and many people do not feel any kind of way about it. People lie under oath. They lie to get their own selves out of trouble. They lie to protect others. They lie to elevate themselves over another. This right here is a common commandment that people break today, bearing false witness against their neighbor. But if we are following Yah, it should be easy to see why we should not engage in this type of behavior. By lying about someone else, you can bring judgment upon them or bring things against them that they do not deserve. And that is just not right to do. For those that think that you are not under the law, do you think it is okay to bear false witness against your neighbor? If you know the answer is no, then rethink your position on not following the law, because the apostles of the New Testament abided in this law too. The last one, number 10. You shall not covet your neighbor's house. You shall not covet your neighbor's wife, nor his male servant, nor his female servant, nor his ox, nor his donkey, nor anything that is your neighbor's. Exodus chapter 20, verse 17. To covet is to yearn to possess or have something that is not yours. This is a huge commandment that is broken today because of the wine of fornication spread from Mystery Babylon. Basically, this place spreads this idea of covetousness. We live in this way completely because the culture of the society is marketing covetousness to everyone. That's marketing, teaching us to want what others have. Now, there's nothing wrong with liking something and saying, you know what, I'm going to work hard to obtain this. But there are different depths to this. When you look at what others have and say, you're going to have this for yourself no matter what, it can walk you into a multitude of sin. Looking at your neighbor's spouse and saying you want him or her for yourself is walking you into sin. Looking at their house or their cars and saying, I'm going to figure out how to take this from them. This is walking you into sin. If it's not yours, then don't dwell on it. If Yah desires to bless you with it, then he will. But when you make it your life's purpose, you will not be blessed. Many people do not realize that the reason why they are not blessed with certain things is because they are covetous, and Yah does not want to bless them because he knows this will drive them deeper into sin like idolatry. This is a commandment that is broken more often than it's not, but people don't recognize it because it is our way today. And again, people don't think about his commandments. We cannot be this way. But unfortunately, people live in rejection of his commands far too much. For those that think you are not under the law, do you think it is okay to covet what belongs to your brother or your sister? If you know the answer is no, then rethink your position on not following the law, because the apostles of the New Testament abided in this law too. You see, these are Yah's commandments, and these things should not be a burden for us to live under or follow. But for some reason, people speak against this as if those who desire to adhere to these commands, that they're being legalistic or just extra religious. And they say the only law that they're to follow is love. They misuse what Yahusha has said about the law, and they use his words as a reason to live in disobedience to him. And so before we end this part of the discussion, let's cover this, because I think if we clarify this will help all of us with understanding how we place the law in our lives. We go to Matthew chapter 22, verses 34 through 40. But when the Pharisees heard that he had silenced the Sadducees, they gathered together. Then one of them, a lawyer, asked him a question, testing him and saying, Teacher, which is the great commandment in the law? Yahusha said to him, You shall love Yahuwah your Elohim with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your mind. This is the first and great commandment. And the second is like it. You shall love your neighbor as yourself. On these two commandments hang all the law and the prophets. And do you know that this is unfortunately what people use to justify lawlessness and breaking the commandments that we just read and went through? This is a main doctrine of Christianity, and it teaches that Yahusha replaced the entirety of the commands when he gave this answer, when he was asked about what was the most important command. Basically, they say that love replaced all the commandments given by Yah. But that is not what Yahusha was saying at all. And if you recognize what this difference is, I think a light bulb might go off and show you how false that doctrine is. Yahusha said the first and greatest commandment is to love Yahuwah your Elohim with all your heart, with all our soul, and with all our mind. Then he said, love our neighbor as ourself. And on those two commandments hang all the law and the prophets. But do you know what he did there? He broke up these 10 commandments and broke them down into the most simplistic understanding. To love Yahuwah our Elohim with all our heart, all of our soul, all of our mind, is to follow the first commandment to not put other gods before him. It's to follow the second commandment and not make any carved images and bow down to them as the lawless pagan nations did their gods. It's to follow the third commandment and not take his name in vain, making it meaningless. It's to honor the fourth commandment to remember the Sabbath day. It's to honor the fifth commandment to honor our mothers and our fathers who Yahuwah gave us. And then the second, which is like it, is to love our neighbors as ourselves. And to do that, we honor the sixth commandment, which is not to commit murder. We follow the seventh commandment and not committing adultery. We follow the eighth commandment and not stealing from our neighbor. We follow the ninth commandment and not bearing false witness on our neighbor. And lastly, we follow the 10th commandment, not coveting what belongs to our neighbor. Yahusha very plainly summed up the commandments into two: loving Yahuwah with all our heart, mind, and soul, and then loving our neighbors as we love ourselves. And this is the summation of it all. But if we live in the commands as Yahuwah has commanded us, we live in love of Him and our neighbor, and thus we live as He commands us. This is what Yahusha was saying when He spoke of love. This is pure obedience to the will of Yah. And if you understand this, you understand the beauty of the law. So imagine trying to justify disobedience to the law after Yahusha summed it up so beautifully. It comes down to love, and the word shows us how we can do this properly. So understanding the commands of Yahuwah are not difficult or a burden. We do them because we love Yahuwah and seek to live as He desires. When we live in objection to His ways and therefore desire to live how we want to, we are actually living like Satanists and are driven away from our Creator. Following the law does not bring us salvation, but we follow His law and commands because we love Him with all of our heart, mind, and soul. And so if you can imagine how many of us who have been led by false doctrines of men have spoken in direct opposition to living in obedience of our Creator, it should all drive us towards repentance. And so if you have ever lived in the false mindset that you do not have to honor those commands, repent from that mindset and turn back to Him at once in the way He has guided and commanded us. His ways are not a burden, but they are a blessing. And we have Messiah that provides forgiveness of our mistakes and our sins, not so that we can abuse His grace and live lawlessly, but that we are able to live in the forgiveness Yah grants us so that we can continue to strive to live the way He desires until His kingdom comes. There is much more to this discussion, but this understanding is the foundation. And if you have never heard another message, I think you have the clarity needed in order to continue to live as Yah commands and desires. So live a life in obedience to the Most High, loving Him with all your heart, mind, and soul, and loving your neighbor as you love yourself. Live a life that is how the Most High desires, and not one that Satan has subtly promoted. The choice is yours, but those who live in lawlessness do not know Messiah. So I want you to live with this clearly in your mind and understanding. Today, all of us must be proper representatives of our faith, and let us all do this by being the ones in the world who keep the commandments of Yahuwah and have the testimony of Yahusha. Let us be the set-apart ones who keep the commandments and live in obedience to the Most High. Be blessed. Hallelujah. Praise Yah. Okay, thanks again for watching. If this has blessed you, please make sure to like it and share it with others. If you haven't done so already, please make sure you subscribe to this channel. Yah willing, I upload every Friday. Please don't forget to follow this ministry on Facebook and Instagram, as well as on my website, Truthunedited.com. If for any reason you do not see this channel any longer, because of all these new rules and everything, you can always find this ministry on Truthunedited.com. Please make sure you subscribe to the email list to always stay connected. Please continue to pray for this ministry. Your prayers and support are sincerely appreciated. As always, thank you to those who have donated to this ministry. Your support is a true blessing. I'm always humbled by your support, and I'm very thankful for you. Thank you. Okay, thanks again everyone for watching. I love you all.